Iron on iron, bronze on human bone. This isn't the sound of battle, it's the sound of dinner in the stables of Diomedes. When the chains snap, the gods look away. The eighth labor, it isn't a path to Olympus. It's a path to a bronze manger, where a hero becomes meat and a tyrant becomes the meal for his own nightmares. Welcome to Thrace. Here, the silence is loudest when the mares are full. Another mindless command. Once more, I am forced to do what no mere mortal could endure. Eurystheus. I watched his face turn gray with every return. He didn't want horses. He wanted to see my bones splinter between the teeth of Thracian monsters. This eighth labor wasn't a test. It was a death sentence wrapped in a king's will, festering in his wretched fear of my strength. We sailed north. The ship cut through black water. Beside me stood Abderus, son of Hermes. There was a lightness in his movements I no longer remembered in myself. His skin knew no scars, only the warmth of the sun. A small band of volunteers, men who believed in my invulnerability, even as I felt nothing but the weight of my own muscle and the cold wind battering my chest. Thrace met us not with a shore, but with a stench, a heavy, cloying smell of decay that choked out the sea salt. The wind carried it from the stables of Diomedes. There was no hay there. They knew no golden oats, only meat, only the torn fibers of those the sea had cast onto these cursed rocks. Every foreign soul seeking refuge here became fodder. 4 mares, fed on fear and human marrow. A step into the darkness of the stable, dust underfoot, mixed with ground bone. In the gloom, eyes burned, not equine, other, glazed with madness. When the chains shattered, they screamed, a neighing that made the cliffs above us shudder, a vibration that traveled through my feet to my very spine. They were preparing to lunge. They tasted fresh blood in the air. I gripped the reins, my muscles locked, straining at the threshold as I wrenched their muzzles away from Abderus. They lunged, rasping, their hooves striking sparks from the stone. There was no taming here, only the raw strength of a demigod pitted against the primal fury of cannibals. I barely held this living chaos in check on the path to the shore. The coarse leather of the reins bit into my palms, flaying my calluses to the raw meat of the hand, while the mares followed, mesmerized by their own greed and the scent of blood to come. They remained rabid beasts every second, waiting only for a flicker of weakness. The masts were in sight. The air was a thick sludge of pitch, wet wood, and the illusion of rescue. But the sea was too far. We were out of time. I didn't hear the hoofbeats first. I heard the earth groan under the weight of iron. A roar rising from the depths of the hinterland. Diomedes had raised his entire army. Metal on metal, thousands of feet, the fury of a cheated tyrant. They closed in faster than we could unfurl the sails. The air grew hot with the breath of an army, as thirsty for our blood as those horses were. Abderus. I had no choice. I heard the army closing in, and I needed my hands free for the club. I entrusted him with the reins, knowing the mortal risk. I saw his thin wrists. I knew the horses remained unbroken, but the emptiness inside whispered, "He is the son of Hermes. He must manage." I left him there on the shore, alone with creatures that saw him only as prey. I hurled myself toward the thunder of the Thracian line. The whistle of arrows, the dull thud of shield hitting shield. Combat is not a dance. It's when your mouth turns salt with blood and your lungs have no room for a scream. You don't strike because you hate. You simply have no time for hate. You strike because your arm knows the trajectory of the blow better than your mind. Time shifted. A minute felt like an eternity. An hour passed like a single sword stroke. I saw the eyes of men dying under my club, and in each of them was astonishment. Then I heard the cry. It wasn't long. It was short, a choking sound, as if someone had snapped a string. When I returned to the shore, having scattered what was left of the army, the sand was no longer gray. It was dark, wet. The horses stood over what remained of the boy. They weren't chewing. They just stared at me with those fire-rimmed eyes, thick pink foam dripping from their muzzles. The momentary submission I had wrung from them by brute force evaporated the second I let go of the reins. My confidence that I could control the chaos became his death warrant. My divinity, my physical dominance, it was all worthless because I could not be in two places at once. He was swallowed by the very rage I had momentarily broken, but failed to destroy. The world went silent. The crash of the surf died. The screams of the dying faded. Only this smell remained, the scent of fresh, young blood mixed with horse sweat. Diomedes. His skin was cold as I dragged him by the hair over the jagged rocks. He screamed something, begged for mercy. I heard no words. I heard only the rasp in my own chest. My hands were shaking, not from horror, but from a surplus of power that had nowhere to go. The bronze mangers waited. I brought him to the place where he had built his hell for years. I threw him into the trough like a bundle of spoiled hay. Watch. I forced myself to watch. A human does not tear apart as easily as it seems. It takes effort. I saw Podargos sink her teeth into his shoulder. I heard the ribs snap. Diomedes didn't scream for long. His lungs filled quickly with his own fluid. His own mares, raised on the flesh of strangers, now savored the taste of their creator. And then came the silence, the most terrible silence of my life. They finished him. They licked the bronze until it shone. Sated by the one who taught them to kill, they suddenly grew still. The wild rage that fed on human flesh flickered out. They became docile like common workhorses. But it wasn't the docility of an animal. It was the exhaustion of monsters that had finally closed the circle of their hunger. Abderus. Later, years from now, I will build a city in his honor. There will be games, lavish, loud, with the roar of crowds and the flash of steel. But that is for later. For now, only silence, an emptiness in my chest that no stone of any wall can fill. Then came the road back. The horses followed me like shadows. They needed no chains. Eurystheus, a little man in a bronze jar. He reeked of fear so strongly that the horses didn't even look his way. He waited for my death, and I brought him his own nightmares. I watched him hide, and it filled me with nothing but loathing. Mount Olympus, slopes where the air is so sharp it cuts the throat. I let them go. They didn't run. They just walked into the forest, slowly, placing their heavy legs with effort. They say wild beasts tore them apart at the foot of the mountain, that the gods would not tolerate such abominations in their woods, or perhaps they simply could not exist in a world where there was no one left to feed them on human pain. I am no hero. I am simply the one who learned to live with the void in his chest after every strike. The sun rises over Mycenae. It is cold. I wait for the next command, not because I must obey, but because in the silence I begin to hear the crunch of bones in the bronze mangers. And that sound is the only thing that reminds me I am still alive.